And welcome on into a victorious edition of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. He is George Bremer. I am Ryan Hickey. We are unfortunately not live on YouTube today, as you can tell, either watching or listening. We're not on after the game. Unfortunately, I had some responsibilities for work that I could not be available post game for. So thank you to George for his flexibility. We're recording on Sunday night. But nonetheless, that does not change right now where we are sitting here, which is a great spot, George, for the Colts. Big time win, 27-20 over the Buccaneers. Move to 6-5 on the season. Move into the 7th and final playoff berth right now as we head into week number 13 here. A big time win. Let me start the pod by asking this question, George. Was this the biggest win of the Colts season so far to date?
I think, it's always hard on that because I feel like you're the prisoner of the moment. I feel like that last touchdown drive was the biggest drive of the season so far to date, because I don't think if you don't cash that in, and the Bucs do come back and win this game, you're in a lot different spot than you are right now talking about a victory. So I guess because of that, that would make, if that's the biggest drive and it won this game, that would make this the biggest win. We talked a lot about it on the pregame show or on the preview show, how important it was for this team to start winning at home, how important it was for the offense to come back and have a pulse, how important it was for them to play complementary football. They did all of that today and won one of the two quote unquote bonus games, left this season. Now of the last 6, only one of them is against an NFC team. We know the AFC games count more. Pick up this win. You got momentum. You've won 3 in a row. As you said, you're in a playoff spot right now. Yeah, I think the biggest win is a safe thing to say.
I would say so too, not because it's the most impressive, right? I would still say what you did on the road in Baltimore, week number 3, with Gardner Minshew there making what we thought was going to be and hoped at that point to be the only start of the season, which obviously has not been the case as we know at this point. Go back then in week number 3 in a bad weather condition game on the road in Baltimore to go in there and win that game in overtime is the best on paper win, right? That's the best opponent so far the Colts have beaten. But why I think this is the most important win so far, the biggest win so far this season, George, is time and opponent. Like you mentioned before in the preview pod, we talked about it. While this was a quote unquote, you can argue bonus game because it's an NFC opponent. So if you lose, sure, you lose obviously a place in the standings and you drop to 5 and 6, but you don't lose any real opportunity to lose out on tiebreakers, which right now outside of the Browns, anyone close to the Colts, either above or below them, the Colts either own the tiebreaker or have a chance to own the tiebreaker when they face head to head here on their upcoming schedule. Again, so everyone outside of Cleveland, they are in a good spot in terms of being above those teams that are competing for a playoff spot. But I thought this game was going to set the tone for what we're going to expect down the stretch. Now, Thanksgiving has just coming up. By the way, belated happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Hopefully it was enjoyable. But really, George, right, this is where the contenders separate themselves from the pretenders. And while the Buccaneers come in with a less favorable or a worse record than the Colts, and while the Colts were favored, it was still one of those games where the Buccaneers were equally as desperate as the Colts. And if you are truly a playoff team this year, you take care of business at home, which they've not done. They're 1-10 their last 11 home games, which is absurd. But the truth, and I like the fact that not only do they win this game, but how they won this game, George, both offensively and defensively. And that's why I think you add it all up collectively. I think so far this is the biggest win to date for this team. I think it sets a tone going forward. Hey, this is a playoff team, but also too, a big time drive after Tampa Bay comes down the field to cut their deficit to just 3 points in the fourth quarter. We've seen this team fold into big spots, especially offensively. They did not. They pushed through a big time touchdown. And the defense, yet again, for the 3rd game in a row, comes up with a big time stop late in the game to preserve the win. The fact that you got a big drive on offense late in the fourth quarter, a big time stop defensively as well, and how you won versus the time of when you won the game post Thanksgiving in a big spot here with a big playoff push upcoming. I'll go best win of the season, George. This was a really, really good win that you have to feel really good about if you're a player, fan, coach going forward after this game.
I can tell you the players feel really good about it. That might be the happiest locker room I've been in all year. I mean, they rightfully Feel really, really good about coming away with a victory in this one. I think closing out a game at home for once made them feel really good. I mean,
Yeah.
go back to so many games just this year, but even back into last year where they had a lead in the fourth quarter and they could not find a way to close the door, and you end up taking an L when you feel like you were the better team, for most of the game. They were able to finish this one out. I think that was a big deal. You talk about how desperate Tampa Bay was coming in. They because Atlanta beat New Orleans, they're still only a game out of first in that division, but it's small consolation to them. They knew coming in, this is a game that they needed. They keep losing winnable games. As on the preview pod, our guests talked about that specifically, that they have got to start winning games that they quote unquote should win. The Colts are in the same boat. That's what we talk about. Both teams were sort of very similar in that regard. And the Colts, the last 3 weeks, have won games they are supposed to win. Now, if you can continue that, it can really, really start to make a playoff push here. Getting into position right now, that to me is pretty remarkable. If you had told me at the beginning of the year that they would start December in a playoff spot, I would not have believed you.
Same, especially with how this season's played out with Gardner Minshew starting all but 3 games, right? If my math is correct there. 4 games this season. So I am with you 1,000%. Did not expect it. Even if Richardson was healthy, did not expect to be talking about this team in that spot come December, but that's exactly where we are, George. And another reason why I really like this win, and I think it's the best win of the year, is because on the preview pod as well, we talked about how this game against the Buccaneers felt eerily similar going into the game against the Saints a few weeks back. We had an NFC South opponent coming in with talent on offense. And when they played the Saints, right, the Saints were discombobulated on offense, where the talent they had was not matching the offensive output they were putting out on the field. They were very inconsistent week in and week out. And that was a game where the Colts got out to an early lead, 17-7, let the Saints back in it. And obviously, as we know, they lose the game and allow 38 points. And then going to this game, the Bucs offense has talent. Rachaad White's a very talented back. Obviously, Mike Evans is a stud. Chris Godwin's a great possession receiver. Baker Mayfield has talent, but again, kind of like Derek Carr, a little bit struggles with consistency. And so just like the Saints offense coming in that was stumbling and bumbling, same thing with the Buccaneers coming to this game. And we said you cannot have a repeat. And this was almost a do-over for the Colts to right the wrong that happened in that New Orleans game. And you mentioned not finishing the job. You're up 17-7 at home, even though it's still the first half. Finish the job, finish the game, and win it. They couldn't do it. Up 17-3. And George, you tweeted this out, and it was spot on. George Bremer, quote, on this week's Blue Horseshoe pod, Ryan Hickey and I suggested this game could be the Saints replay. Colts led New Orleans 17-7 in the second quarter. Can they hold on this time? That was after the Colts took a 17-3 lead. It got a little hairy at times, George. It definitely was not a 2-touchdown cushion the entire game, but they did right the wrong from the New Orleans game and finish the job, like we just said, on offense and defense, the way they couldn't against the Saints a few weeks ago.
One of the things I thought was most notable in the post-game pressers is somebody asked Baker Mayfield about the sacks, which there were 6 of, by the way. A Tampa Bay team that had allowed just 20 sacks coming in, had really good pass protection all year, 6 sacks, great job by the defensive line. What I thought was most notable about that was Mayfield said coverage caused a lot of them, that he had to hold the ball. They were coverage sacks. And I think that just shows you how much the Colts have grown from that New Orleans game to this one against Tampa Bay. It's not just that they're not allowing the explosive plays anymore. It's a lot of that has gone from changing from the single high coverage that they played almost all year long to, in certain situations, going to more of a quarters coverage, playing 2 high safeties, getting more bodies out there deep in the field to keep this from happening. It wasn't that there weren't miscommunications today. I mean, at one time, Mike Evans was in the end zone, and the closest people to him were the fans, on behind the sideline. So it wasn't a perfect game, but it didn't. And I think the Bucs had 4 explosive pass plays. I want to say, I think they had a 30-yarder and 3 over 20. But there wasn't a 58-yard touchdown that was a complete break. There wasn't a big 3rd down that turned the game. The closest to that was the big play on 4th and 10. But they recovered from that and got a stop and kept them out of the end zone. I mean, it was just every time the script started going down that road again, the Colts rewrote the ending.
And that's important too. I'm glad you mentioned because it was far from a perfect game. We'll get into some of the flaws here, both offensively, defensively. But you're 100% right. This team not only showed improvement, they also show again how tough and resilient they are. Because there were times in the second quarter where Gardner Minshew looked invincible, and all of a sudden Gardner Minshew looked like the worst quarterback in the NFL, where he's throwing touchdowns and shaking and running for touchdowns, and then all of a sudden just is addicted to throwing the ball to the other team. There's times where this defense, whether it's in the run game or the pass game, like you said, had miscommunications, had some big time letdowns in the run game, and allowed the worst rushing offense in the league to rush for 125 yards and rush the ball 6.6 yards per carry. So there was definitely areas of concern, and it was, again, far from pretty. But again, the mark, I think, of a good team, George, is one that overcomes their mistakes and does not allow them to compound. And the Colts, credit, they have really grown. You can, right in front of your eyes, you could see the difference with this team now as we get past week 12 versus early in the year in week 2, week 3, week 4. Those mistakes would lead to losses. Now all of a sudden they're overcoming those mistakes, and when you're sitting here talking about a win, when there's still a lot wrong that happened, it shows you, number one, how well coached this team is. Shane Steichen, I thought, George, coming off the bye, was incredible, was creative, had some really good play calls. I think really was aggressive. And you saw, because again, too, when you have time off, you're this late in the season, first time head coach, I think it's easy to get conservative and play not to lose and say, oh, wow, we're playing well. Like, I don't want to be the one to screw it up. He was going for it on fourth down, called some aggressive and genius play calls on fourth down and get some explosive plays, and helped win the Colts this game.
I mean, they were 3 for 4 on fourth down, and that's another one of the big differences. I think the Colts finished in the red zone and the Bucs didn't. That was one big difference. The Colts won the turnover battle, which we said on the preview pod, whoever wins the turnover battle is going to win the game. That last turnover by Samson Ebukam on the strip sack not only won them the turnover battle, arguably won them the game. But aside from those two areas, which were incredibly important, Tampa Bay came in the number one defense in the red zone. The Colts had to finish drives down there. They did for the most part today. Certainly did a better job of it than the Bucs did. And they had to win the turnover battle. The next most important element to me was fourth down. The Colts going for it 4 times, getting 3 of them. I think the second quarter, they had the 24-yard pass to Michael Pittman. Nobody in his area code on that play. It was just an RPO, but they were able to scheme him up and get him wide open and continue that drive. And then obviously what I think was the play of the game, the 4th and 1 on the final touchdown drive when they're trying to protect the 3-point lead. They're near midfield again. They were at Tampa Bay's 49. They had just turned the ball over in a similar area, I think on the previous drive, and had led to a field goal for the Bucs. And you're sitting there thinking, man, I don't know if they can survive it again. They've got to pick this up. They called a play that apparently was drawn up during the week by Tom Manning, the tight ends coach. Lots of moving pieces on that play. Zaire Franklin was in at fullback. And apparently he wasn't. That was one of the big. They didn't debate whether they're going to call the play. They didn't debate anything else about the play. But during the week, they weren't sure who the fullback was going to be because there's not a fullback on the roster. And ultimately, Shane Steichen was the one who made the call to put Zaire Franklin in there. And I think the fact that it was a linebacker helped sell the idea that this was going to be a power run. What else is he doing out there? If it was something else, you would have Zach Moss, or you would have an extra lineman, or you would have an offensive player. If you're putting a defensive player out there, it's a gimmick, and you're going to run the ball. He's going to be the lead blocker. That's what he's there for. The Bucs bought it hook, line, and sinker. If you go back and watch that play, they absolutely bought into that fake. And it left Mo Alley-Cox wide open down the middle of the field. Had Gardner not thrown it a little behind him, he might have scored. I'm not sure. He's not the most fleet of foot, so he might still have been caught from behind. But it's a 30-yard gain on 4th and 1. And then what do? The other great thing, the fourth biggest part to me of this game, the run game was back today. 6th-ranked run defense in the NFL, and the Colts went over 150 yards. Jonathan Taylor had 91 alone, and he just 3 straight Jonathan Taylor carries from the 19 in. Both of his touchdown drives for him today were vintage Jonathan Taylor moments where he just took over in the red zone, ran through defenders, and broke into the end zone. The 4th down offense, the turnovers, and the return of the run game and the red zone execution, I think that's what won this game for Indianapolis.
You are spot on. I could not agree more about Zaire Franklin. If they put Will Mallory in that fullback spot instead of Mo Cox is not as wide open as he is. Maybe the ball is batted away because it's snuffed out quicker. And maybe we're talking about, like, not to be dramatic here, but I think true, talking about a loss. That play really changed the tide here for this team. And you're 100% right. Who they put there was so important to sell it, where the Buccaneers defense ignored Mo Cox. And there's a fullback here. There's a linebacker that shouldn't be here. Hold on. Let's put our antennas up and let the tight end run right behind you because you're so focused on 44. It was genius. And like I said, that small detail paid off massive dividends in that spot there. Tremendous creativity from Tom Manning, from Shane Steichen. Everyone, execution was perfect as well to get that down. A big play here to extend the Colts drive that led to eventually the game-winning touchdown. But also, JT, to your point, I mean, I got to go back and watch every single run. So I may be off by one or two, George, but I swear there may have been once or twice where the first guy brought him down. He was, especially in the red zone, he was running hard, running through tackles. Rarely did the first guy that met Jonathan Taylor in the backfield actually bring him down. He was a man possessed. And it felt like, too, and you look at his numbers, again, just 15 carries. He did all that damage, 91 yards, 2 touchdowns on 15 carries alone. It felt like at times he was invisible. And then when you truly needed him down in the red zone, the Colts are like, all right, we'll save you between the 20s. We can, expose this porous Buccaneers passing defense. But then in the red zone, JT, that's where we're really going to utilize you. It worked out to perfection. And JT ran like a madman. Like I said, just 2 touchdowns. The effort was unbelievable. And he, again, just continues to look more and more like that 2021 form that helped carry this team, not unfortunately all the way to the end, but helped carry this team to the point where they were 1 game away that year from making the playoffs.
This might have been the best that the rotation has looked. And Moss had a really nice game, too. He had 55 yards and had a couple big runs in there as well. I know at least once he was out there in a hurry-up situation. I think it was right before the end of the half, and they ran the ball on first down. And it was the second time in the game that Tampa Bay seemed to be caught completely off guard. Did not see a run coming because almost every time to that point, it was interesting because up to that point, Zach Moss had more snaps than Jonathan Taylor did. I don't know what the final number came out to be. It was probably close. It may still have ended up that way, but it was because Taylor or Moss was in there for pass protection. He's the better blocking running back. And so they were pass heavy, obviously, against the 31st ranked pass defense in the league. Every time Moss had been out there prior to that, pretty much he was blocking for Gardner Minshew. Now it's a 2-minute drill, and the Bucs again completely believing that Moss is out there to be a pass protector, and he busts off like a 20-yard run to get that drive jump started. Now, they did some things late in that drive that ended up leading to a missed field goal, one of which I've never seen before. I don't know about you, but Gardner Minshew running with plenty of open field in front of him and turning back and running into a defender. I don't know if he's trying to get a foul and get to the free throw line. I have no idea what was going on there. But at that point, I thought it might not be the Colts' day.
George, I could watching that. It's like, what are you doing? And the broadcaster, I'll look at the broadcasters on CBS, Spiro Dedes and Adam Archuleta, were almost like praising him of, oh, look, he's got eyes behind his back, in the back of his head. No. He literally ran the wrong way. He was running the right way. He was going to, if you're watching from the side view, making the right to turn upfield. He goes, screw it. Almost looking for like, I need to hit somebody here. So who's the closest guy? Oh, this guy is. I'm just going to go the wrong direction and lower my shoulder into him. It was bizarre. I think we can laugh about it now because the team won, but it does a little bit go back to just his lack of just lack of awareness at times where it's like, holy smokes, what are you thinking? Well, look to the open right. Look to the open field. Look to where there's no one out there. Go right. Don't go backwards. Go forwards. That was. I know
the clock was ticking down, and that's why I think there were a couple things on that drive. I mean, we talked about some of the things they did well. To me, one of the worst stretches was that final drive. They got past midfield with about 50 odd seconds left. It was close to a minute. They don't call a timeout, even though they have 2 of them. They let it tick all the way down to 25 seconds, and then Minshew made that unexplainable play And all of it leads to a 58-yard field goal attempt that could have been a much closer field goal attempt if any of those previous mistakes weren't made. So again, it wasn't a perfect day, but they overcame it. And I think to your point earlier, that's the kind of thing week 3, week 4, week 5 cost this team games. Man, if they had handled the end of the half better, they beat Cleveland. If they handled the end of the half better, maybe they beat New Orleans. It felt like that was going to be the line again today. And instead, they came out to start their quarter. Wasn't perfect again, but they got a field goal added to their lead. A game they win by 7. It's an important drive, an important moment. They just kept bouncing back today. They were resilient today more than probably any other point this season, except maybe Baltimore.
You're 100% right. This was a true just win where, like I said, you face adversity. Both sides of the ball were struggling at times, and just said, next play, we're moving on. And that's, again, I think a sign of a really well-coached team, but also a playoff team. And that's the mindset you have to have. You see it all across the NFL. I mean, just recency bias here, watching the Eagles-Bills game. You look at Jalen Hurts in that first half. He was flat out terrible. You could argue he was the worst quarterback, how he played in the first half of anyone so far in week number 12, and then bounced back to have 5 touchdowns, 4 of which coming in the second half, and the Eagles plotted an overtime victory against the Bills that no one saw coming. Like, that's the resolve that helps you win championships. When how you play in the previous drive, quarter, game have no impact on how you're going to play now moving forward. That's one of the marks of a champion, and that's how you get to that level. And the Colts, for this game, showed you that they have that capability of they're not going to get down, especially with a young team, George, too. It's so easy when you're inexperienced, when you're young, where you want to be perfect, where you want to make, the highlight plays and contribute to winning. It's easy if you're Jalen Jones to get upset after a blown coverage here that allows Mike Evans to just walk in for the easiest touch of maybe of his career. Or it's frustrating if you're Bernard Ryman, who had a key holding call that could have hurt the Colts there and really lost them the game. And to their credit, offensively, defensively, they pushed through, blocked out the negative plays, and just kept playing. And that's the reason why we're sitting here talking about a team with a 27-20 victory and a team right now that is 6-5 going into December, George, holding a playoff spot.
Which is still remarkable.
Insane.
To even say that. I'm also digesting the fact that, that you're not wrong that Jalen Hurts might have been the worst quarterback in week 12 with the first half play. But you're not wrong in a week in which Tim Boyle played a game in the NFL. That's
right.
Also pretty remarkable. But you're not wrong. That's how bad Jalen Hurts was in the first half of this game. And that's the mark of a good team. You're finding a way to overcome that. The elements. I mean, the Eagles ended up having to kick a really long field goal in the rain and the wind just to force overtime. It didn't matter. They kept going. The Colts were very similar to that today. I think some of that has to do with the similarities between the two head coaches. Shane Steichen and Nick Sirianni, far from the same guy. I don't think you're going to see Shane doing, the Fly Eagles Fly celebration on the sideline anytime soon. But I think they're very similar in the way they get players to play for them, the way they get them to buy in, and in the idea that neither one of them has a team that quits. They will not. We've said that all year long about this Colts team. They've messed up. They've had bad games. They've had bad moments. They never quit. They fight to the end. I think that's happened in every game. Even when they were down 30-6 in Jacksonville, they fight back. They end up scoring 20 points. It doesn't do anything in the end because those kind of moral victories don't matter. But we've never seen this team pack it in. I don't think you're going to see them, allow defensive linemen to do snow angels next to their injured quarterback. This is not a team that has anything but full effort in them. And days like today, it might have been the difference, honestly, in winning and losing. Not that the Bucs gave up, because they didn't. To their credit, they were fighting as well. But the Colts wouldn't match that fight in years past. And this year, you can say a lot of things about Shane Steichen's Colts. They have never failed to take the fight to the opponent.
You are 1,000,000% right about that. I'm laughing to myself if you're watching on video, because you said Shane Steichen would never match the emotion that Nick Sirianni outwardly displays on the sidelines. And, what comes to memory right away is him running up to Colts fans saying that win last year when they beat the Colts in Lucas Oil Stadium was for Frank Reich, and let everyone know, how much that win over the Colts meant to him. Well, I'm laughing because I'd never seen a coach, by the way, in a game run out almost halfway onto the field to argue the spot of the ball the way Shane Steichen did when Gardner Minshew was scrambling. I think it was a 3rd and 6 right near midfield. And he was, I thought from the broadcast, and the naked eye, it looked like he got the first down. The officials ruled him short. That's what led to the Mo Alley Cox big 30-yard pass play down the field. But I'm laughing because like the referees are spotting it. Shane flies out, and you see the referee be like, get back on the sideline. But he was literally a third of the way on the field to basically point like, no. He got 2 yards further. You spotted. George, I never saw that before. Coach just run, we see him be upset and run to the side, to the side judge or call the referee over. I've never seen in a game where there's no timeout, where like the play clock is running, a coach run basically on the field to respot the ball. That's
Shane's personality, though. I mean, he is all ball. So I think like he's going to get much more fired up over the spot of the ball than he is like to celebrate a victory. That's the difference. Because I don't know, Nick probably would run out on the field to argue it too, but they're very different personalities, and the way they show it is very different, and what fires them up is very different. But I think coaching wise, they're very similar. I think their philosophies are pretty much in lockstep, and you see a lot of the things the Eagles do. If you watch both teams, you see a lot of things the Eagles do. The Colts are doing as well. Now, Colts have not mastered the tush push yet. They've kind of given up on it, which is probably for the better right now, because apparently Philadelphia is the only team in the world that it can't be stopped by them, and no one else can execute it properly. So I don't know how that works. I know there's dark magic going on there, but it's insane. But yeah, Shane going out there, that was funny. The other part of that, how are we in year 2023 with all the digital elements that we have at our sides, with laser levels, with all these other things, and we still got like guys with Home Depot chains out there running out to measure spots? How is that happening?
I think it was last year, if my memory serves me correct. Wasn't like 2 games in a row the chains broke and there was like a delay in the game because they had to get a new set of chains? George, I could not agree more. Why there's not a chip in the ball for first downs, for breaking the goal line? Like, why we still are using chain gangs and right now and having just referees spot the ball just by this looks about right. Let's just drop it here. It makes no sense for a multi-billion-dollar sport that something as massive as spotting the ball and did he break the goal line or not is still, there's no technology that's easily accessible and usable. Why it's not being implemented, I should say. I have no idea. You're 1,000,000% right. But here we are, though, still going with the naked eye, still having referees running down the sideline, keeping up with the play, trying to also then spot the ball and guess where the player was down first and where the ball should be. It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. One of the biggest keys of the game you mentioned was 6 sacks. Huge. Getting pressure on Baker Mayfield, taking him down. Samson Ebukam, 2 sacks on the day. The big one at the end of the game, getting the strip sack, recovered by Dio Adengbo. That defensive line, not only were they getting consistent pressure, but also, too, like you mentioned, the secondary as well, George, did a tremendous job for the most part in terms of shutting down this passing attack, forcing Baker to hold on to the ball, which allowed the pass rush also to get home. Defensively, again, this team deserves a lot of credit because really about halfway through this year, we have seen a shift. Really since that Saints game, which was, week 8, right? If my weeks are correct here, yeah, week 8. So then it was week 9 Panthers, week 10 Patriots. So really since week number 8, that Saints game, you have seen a totally different now defense. I know you can argue, look at the opponents' last 3 games, Panthers, Patriots, Buccaneers, but the Buccaneers, again, have talent, and the Colts defense, again, really rose to the occasion and was a big reason why they won this game.
They came up big. The 2 turnovers were huge. We haven't talked about Ronnie Harrison yet, but you want to talk about just a storybook moment. And first of all, Shaq Leonard was there, which is still blowing my mind. He's there. He's watching from a suite. They showed a video package, a highlight reel of him during a timeout. Then they showed him on the screen. The crowd gave him a huge ovation, a really nice moment for a guy who's a legend of this franchise, and who you'd love to have seen a better ending for him. But it was nice to get some closure there. Full house sitting there cheering him on. And just moments later, the guy who took his roster spot steps in front of a pass, picks it off, goes the other way with it. What a story that is. I talked a little bit with Ronnie Harrison after the game. He said, he played some dime in college. He played a little bit of dime at Cleveland. And so that's kind of like being a linebacker because they take the extra D linebacker off and put the extra DB in. But the biggest thing for him right now is like run fits and that kind of stuff is what he's still adjusting to. To come in, replacing a legend, playing your first game in this uniform, and getting an interception early too, first quarter, set up the Colts' first touchdown. That's kind of one of those little hidden moments that I think was just a great story today, and really happy for Shaq to get that moment in front of the home crowd.
What was your, like, did you have any idea that he was going to be there? This was going to happen? Like, what was your reaction when all of a sudden it's like the camera's there and goes, holy, Shaq is in the stadium?
I was surprised when they were doing the highlight video, honestly. I was like, wow, he cut him on Tuesday. Like, it's kind of cold to do the highlight video now. And then they showed Shaq, and I was like, oh, that's why they're doing the highlight video. Because I expected when he signs with somebody else, he comes back, he'll do that. It was that moment, but he's not on another team yet. He's actually there cheering on the team. Some of the players' news, I hear Franklin said that he was, aware. He'd been talking to him before the game and knew that he was going to be there. I'm sure EJ Speed knew. Linebackers all knew. But it was just, and then to have Shaq go on Twitter right after that, and praise Ronnie Harrison, talk about how hard he's worked and how much he deserves this moment and this spot. I don't think I'm a big enough man to do that. Somebody takes my job covering the Colts, I'm not tweeting about what a great job they did, So that was really, I think, all around just it's emblematic of this special relationship between this city, this franchise, and Shaq Leonard, and also just his character and how much he still truly does care about this football team.
And even too, going back to when he was cut on Tuesday there, he still had an obligation where he's giving out turkeys local to the community, and he didn't allow that decision to change what he was going to do. He's still going to serve the community, even though he was not going to be a part of that Indy community anymore, at least in his playing career. So just like you said, shows you what kind of man he is. We haven't had a really chance to react to it since it was a bizarre holiday week schedule. And of course, by the way, that news breaks after we're done recording our podcast, George, which we've had a bad run of big news breaking after we record podcasts. Of course, we were not able to do an emergency pod there, but also to this game, like it's, I think a good thing and a bad thing he was cut. Meaning, obviously, look, it sucks. I love Shaq Leonard. I love everything he stands for. His energy he brings. He is truly, the face right now of that defense. He brings so much juice. Good guy off the field as well. Easy to root for. So it sucks to see him now not on the team anymore. And soon, I'm sure, going to be on a new team. Hopefully he gets back to the maniac ways. It's something that we've not seen for the most part a lot this year. Definitely the splash plays that we've been accustomed to seeing since 2018 have not been there the last 2 years. But so it sucks that he's no longer there, and a really great guy to root for on and off the field is no longer going to be part of this team or part of the community. But it's also a good thing because that just shows you how much depth there is and how well developed that linebacker position specifically is, where you can feel the need to cut Shaq Leonard and trust Zaire Franklin to step in, and he's been really the last 2 years anyway, been playing at a very high level. Trust EJ Speed with a bigger role to keep on playing well, which he's done so far this year. Lose Bobby Okereke in for agency and not really bat an eye. Bring a guy like Ronnie Harrison in, who's mostly played defensive back and safety his entire career. Put him essentially at a new position and have him make a splash play right away. One of the first drives of the game, linebacker for the Colts, really since 2018 when Shaq was first drafted, has been the deepest and usually one of the most developed positions in all of in this team, but maybe even all the NFL, how much turnover they've had and still how much production they have still seen on the field. And so it gives you a lot of encouragement when you see you can move off of a really good and highly paid player in Shaq Leonard and not skip a beat whatsoever. And that just, and you saw it again on Sunday.
Absolutely. And I think everybody would love to see it end better for him. I mean, no one saw this coming. It was shocking to everyone that he was cut. I think everyone kind of felt like there was going to be a separation at the end of the year, just because of the contract and the fact that the guaranteed money was up. Everyone was expecting that, he probably wouldn't be on the 2024 Colts. To have it happen in the middle of the year was really stunning. And I'll tell you, the locker room on Wednesday was a somber place. I mean, everybody was talking. DeForest Buckner usually doesn't talk on Wednesdays. Part of it, he was talking because obviously Thursday was Thanksgiving and not everyone was going to be there. But also, I think he just wanted to. He knew it was the day that everyone was talking about, Shaquille and what he meant to this franchise, and he wanted. He only played with him the last 3 years. He wanted to get in there and say his piece, which Buckner said he's one of one. Zaire Franklin said they're lifelong friends no matter what happens, and Franklin said today that there were emotions before the game because you don't really notice how big a part he is of your game day routine until he's not there. And you're out there in pregame warmups and Shaq's not there with him. And it was different. And there was an adjustment. And I think there was some question. How's this team going to respond? Because it was a big emotional moment for them. And how are they going to respond? Playing arguably their best defensive game of the year, again, outside of Baltimore, and picking up a huge victory. So, and I think that's what Shaq would want them to do. Based on that tweet, that he confirms that's what he would want them to do.
You're right. That's another good point too. That adds just to the resiliency of this team, where the loss on the field is not that great this year because again, Shaq was not playing as much, and we saw really EJ Speed really kind of take over his role and lead to part of the reason why he was cut early this week. So it wasn't as much of an on-field loss as, like you just said, it was an off-the-field leadership, energy, zapping move there. That's like, oh, one of my good friends or one of most joyful guys in the locker room is no longer there on a daily basis. It does hurt. And like I said, it's just another piece of adversity they had to overcome on Sunday. And they did. They absolutely did, obviously, on their way to beating the Buccaneers. One last thing here, George, before you do wrap up this pod, and Tuesday's pod is going to be filled a lot more with playoff talk and seeding and kind of looking ahead as well. But to kind of wrap up this pod here, George, we kind of talked a lot about the positives, and there were a lot of positives in this 27-20 victory. We hit a little bit on the negatives, some secondary lapses as well, miscommunication. And Gardner Minshew at times, again, just looking like he's never seen someone in a blue jersey before that he wants to throw the ball to. Is that so? This is I should know this, but I always get confused. The color the Buccaneers wore today for the uniforms, is that pewter? Is pewter the gray or is pewter the red? I never got that straight.
Pewter is the gray, and
gray.
It was interesting to see two dark. I thought Bucs would have white jerseys on. That was interesting seeing the two dark. Now there was big contrast between them, which I'm sure why it was allowed. But yeah, all pewter for the Bucs. Colts should have gone with the Indiana Knights uniforms to answer that.
Please, never again, never again. But you are right. When I saw that, because I saw the first on TV, the Buccaneers uniforms, like, oh, are the Colts wearing white at home? Like, that's kind of weird. And you see them in their normal uniforms. You're right. Usually you don't see two darker uniform teams. I like it personally. I hope this happens more. That grayish, in this case, technically pewter color. But it looked like Gardner Minshew was infatuated with pewter there in the second quarter. He just could not help himself.
Just run into it.
Holy, run into it. He's throwing to it. I think he forgot what team he was on there for a second. But they overcame that and overcame also a poor rush defense. That's what I really want to talk about, George, here. Because the Colts did face the worst rushing attack statistically in the NFL and ended up allowing 125 yards on the ground and allow the Bucs to rush for 6.6 yards per carry. How big of a concern is this going forward here, that this run defense either is going to be exposed, or is this more of a one-off, you think, and then they'll get back on track here? Because guess who's, well, not coming to town because they're going to Nashville, but you get the point. You're facing Derrick Henry next week, and that's a guy who, if you have any cracks in the run defense, he's going to take advantage of.
Yeah, that was something came to mind right away when Rachaad White went for 100 yards in that game. It'll be a different challenge, obviously. They're going to be much more focused on the run defense next week because of Tennessee. You absolutely stop the run first. They're still going to have to play their quarters defense, though, because one thing we have seen from Will Levis is he will throw the ball deep to DeAndre Hopkins if you give him the opportunity. So they're going to have to be, on top of things for that. Also, by the way, I usually text this to you, but I didn't have a chance yet today. So Colts are a 2-point favorite as far as the opening line goes next week down on the road in Tennessee. But yeah, I think long term it's not that big of a deal because we all know Grover Stewart's coming back after this Tennessee game. And maybe we'll be the fullback after that. You got to figure it might have been him, right?
Oh,
Had he
good
been here, it
call.
might have been him. But he'll be back, and hopefully he's going to get a goal line carry. I've been calling for that for a couple of years now. Shane's showing all this innovation, all this aggressive ideas. We deserve. Zaire Franklin said after the game, they owed the fans a win because they've been so bad at home lately. 3-10 in the last few years going into this game, 1-4 this year. Said they owed the fans a win. They owe the fans a Grover Stewart touchdown.
I don't want to rain on the parade because I think that would be tremendous. I would trust Buckner more than Grover with the ball in his hands. That's the only thing I'm going to say.
We got a Buckner touchdown earlier this year, though.
That's true. We did.
Stretch and everything. An outstanding play by him. Didn't win the game, unfortunately. But we got the Forrest Buckner touchdown. One thing on a serious note, one other thing I want to say about Shaq, because we didn't have the post, the post-release pod. One of the things that I heard is that he was going to be inactive. I think he confirmed that when he had the turkey deal too. But I think people need to realize when you're inactive, you're on the scout team. You're out there running the other team's defense. You are not practicing with team for all intents and purposes. And you obviously wouldn't dress on game day. I think that would have been a bigger insult to Shaquille Leonard than releasing him would be. I just want to throw that out there.
Interesting. I guess I always assumed against inactive players practice like with the normal team and like the scout players are the scout players. I never, I guess, put two and two together that if you're not going to play, they're not going to have you practice and take reps away from other guys that will play. That's interesting. And it also seems like I assume that this is going to be one of those, okay, release me if you're not going to play me sort of situations. It doesn't sound like, at least from what Shaquille Leonard's side of this is that he demanded or forced this release. It was more of a Colts thing, which, like you highlighted, could be more of a sign of respect of just like, hey, look, we're not going to play you. You kind of lost your spot. So allow you to latch on to another team now instead of ride this out for another 7 games, have you be inactive and have it be a real slap in the face here. So giving him a chance to win a ring, play on a competitive team here, and get back into playing shape and hopefully get his career back on track as well. We'll obviously keep an eye on where he goes and where teams are interested. I'm sure that there'll be plenty of teams this week, especially now, interested in bringing him in for a workout and trying to get him on the team for a playoff push here as well. But going back to at least the run defense, I'm not too concerned. Like, I'm a little bit concerned this week because this is the last game you're going to have without Grover Stewart. This is upcoming. There's going to be the 6th and final game of his suspension. Once he's back, I think this run defense is going to go back to normal. And again, when you have Buckner and Stewart in the middle there clogging things up, no one's running on them. Especially too when you look at the schedule, what they have. Texans can't run the ball. Steelers can't run the ball. Bengals are going to try to run the ball now more without Joe Burrow, but I don't think that's going to happen. So you're not playing a lot of teams.
Falcons won't use their running back for
Who?
some reason. The Falcons won't use their running back for some reason.
You're right about that. I don't know what Bijan Robinson did or what Arthur Smith is thinking. You're right about that. So you don't have to worry about him running for 100 yards anytime soon. You're spot on about that. But I think a lot of the issues are solved with Grover Stewart come back. It's just honestly this week in Tennessee is about survival. As long as you can limit Derrick Henry and not have him go off for one more game here, you should be good going forward. So it is frustrating that, again, the worst rushing team in the NFL, you have a 100-yard rusher in Rachaad White. You let them carry for 6.6 yards per carry. You allow them back in the game when you're up by 10 in the fourth quarter, not on passing plays to Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield and Chris Godwin, but on a massive 40-yard run by Rachaad White that really all of a sudden now gave the Buccaneers some life when you had them dead to rights. That is all definitely a little bit frustrating for sure. But I think one man in Grover Stewart does solve, George, a lot of those woes. So it's really just survive, gang tackle Derrick Henry. Please go for the legs. Do not even try to go up high. He's going to run you over and make you look like a fool. Go low, wrap your arms around his legs, George, and just survive next week in Tennessee.
I wonder, too, they haven't really had a weather game, this year. They thought they were going to in Baltimore. Fortunately for them, the forecast really didn't come to pass. They didn't really have a really crazy game. I don't know what the weather forecast is going to be, but it's at least going to be cold down there, you would imagine, on game day. And then the next week in Cincinnati. The next 2 road games, after that, they're home or they're at Atlanta, which is obviously an indoor stadium as well. Or I think they might have that hole on top, but it's mostly an indoor stadium.
It's covered.
It's covered. You're not gonna. It's also Georgia, so you're not gonna be as worried about the weather there as you will elsewhere. But I do wonder, is that something that comes into play when you're talking about next week and trying to defend Derrick Henry? It's going to be a colder game. Might there be precipitation? Might there be harder ground? A lot of things are going on in that one that we can talk about in the preview pod that you can subscribe now and catch that later on this week. But I think it's an element they haven't really faced that the next 2 weeks that they might see a little bit of it.
Really fast on the offensive side of the ball, George, to give a shout out, Michael Pittman Jr.
Yep.
Really good game, 10 catches, 107 yards, some big time clutch catches, some really tough contested catches as well. He was tremendous, George, for this team, the real go-to threat, big time conversions, big time plays. He really earned his money and had, off the top of my head, I would say the best game of the season so far.
He would get my game ball today because I really think his ability to make those plays helped open up the running game. I think that's why they were able to run. We've been saying that all year long. You want to be able to run against good run defenses. Vita Vea is out there. You get your backup center in there. Hats off to Wesley French because you did not notice Vita Vea today against the backup center. But I think the job that Pittman did, especially early, making some big plays, keeping that defense honest, is why Jonathan Taylor ends up with 91 yards and they go for 156 as a team.
Great call. Great call on Wesley French, giving him his rightful shout out. Like I said, Vita Vea, we talked about him in the run game. That's one of the reasons why the Buccaneers are one of the best run stuffing teams in the league. He was basically irrelevant for most of the game and mostly invisible. A big part of that is the Colts offensive line, led now by Wesley French, who was replacing Ryan Kelly at center, did a tremendous job. So you're going to give your game ball to Michael Pittman Jr. Again, 10 catches, 107 yards. 24 was his long. Did a really good job there and moving the chains to being a reliable target for Gardner Minshew. I'll go on the defensive side of the ball, George. I'll go Samson Ebukam. 2 sacks, 1 tackle for loss. Obviously, the big strip sack on Baker Mayfield that forced the fumble, recovered by Dio Dengbo, that helped win the game here for the Colts. That defensive line got pressure. We mentioned it, 6 sacks on Baker Mayfield, harassed him, and really too limited this passing attack that could be explosive with the Rachaad White feature out of the backfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. That was in a passing attack that, again, could get back on track the way we saw the Saints get back on track a few weeks ago. Defensive line was a big reason why they did not. Ebukam himself, 2 out of the 6 sacks. Big shout out to him. Again, against I should say, going against Tristan Wirfs. No small task there, left tackle. He's been very solid for the Buccaneers. Bull rushed him, beat him, got to Baker, got the ball out in a big strip sack when you needed it most, George, to help secure the win. It's complimentary football. Both sides of the ball got it done.
I'm glad you gave your game ball to Samson Ebukam because he might have just taken it otherwise. So it's nice that you're able to keep that from happening.
You're right. He's on a rampage. And again, that continues to be, George, by the way, one of the most underrated at the time and one of the best free agent signings Chris Ballard has made. Now, I get it. The crop is small and he doesn't make a lot of free agent signings. Make all the jokes you want. But he has been one of the by far best free agent signings Chris Ballard has made, and that continues to reap benefits here.
Yeah, I mean, they've been trying to replace Danico Autry for the last couple of years, and went in and signed Ebukam, and he's done that and more. I mean, he looks like a young version of Danico Autry, making huge plays, making game-winning plays today. But I thought, and to get back to the beginning of the pod, it's probably the best game from a complimentary football standpoint. The offense did things to win this game. The defense did things to win this game. They did miss a field goal, but it was 58 yards, so we'll give them a pass on that. I didn't feel like any of the 3 phases let them down. A lot of the past wins, you say, well, they won in spite of the defense. They won in spite of the offense. Today, I think all 3 phases helped win this football game.
And even to dive deeper into that, George, complimentary football, even within all 3 phases, you had every aspect of that phase make plays to win. Like, it wasn't just the offense. Oh, it was just the running game and Jonathan Taylor carried this offense. The running game was good, but also the passing game was effective and made some big plays when you needed to. Gardner Minshew had a few shaky plays, don't get us wrong, but also made some big time throws to help win the Colts this game. Defensively, we just highlighted the defensive line getting 6 sacks on Baker Mayfield. But also the secondary did a really good job for the most part as well, forcing covered sacks, forcing Baker Mayfield to hold onto the ball and allowing the defensive line to get pressure on Baker, get home eventually, get the sack. It was an area too where it wasn't just one part of the defense or one part of the offense carried the way. They got contributions from every aspect within those offensive and defensive sides of the football, which is also really encouraging as well here. Everyone contributed, George. I feel like we've said this a lot, which is a good thing. A true team win.
Yep, a true team win. And now, as a result, we're going to have interesting podcasts in December for the first time ever as the Blue Horseshoe Pod, because they're going to play meaningful games in December.
You are. I'm glad you mentioned that. For the first time in the Blue Horseshoe Pod history, short history, but history, meaningful December podcasts are here. One last one to go here in November. We will be back on Tuesday to hit really more on the playoff picture. Again, so big time games coming up here for the Colts in December. A lot is still in front of them, and they truly now can control their own destiny with who they have played already in the past, but also now looking ahead, who is on their future schedule, and look at the teams that they're facing and fighting for those playoff spots with above and below them. A lot of teams near the Colts. We're also going to be on the Colts schedule here in the next few weeks. So this is, if you haven't already, don't know what you're waiting for, but now is the time to make some history and join us for some meaningful December pods. Subscribe on YouTube, Blue Horseshoe Podcast. Also check us out wherever you do get your podcasts, Blue Horseshoe Podcast. We are back, baby George. It is not only Titans week, it is playoff. We can't say playoff week. I take that back. But right now, we are talking about a team going into Titans week that currently holds a playoff spot. That's how we will phrase it. Just like we thought in the beginning of the year when George and I both picked the Colts to make the playoffs, we thought this was going to happen. So no surprises here, to say the least. And it is a good time. I mean, it's always a good time to be alive, but a good time to be a Colts fan right now, George.
Like Mo Cox said after the game, they control their own destiny. You know, if they win out, they're a playoff team. Now, it's a big if, but they could say that a year ago. So they're in a good spot. They don't need help right now. They just need to keep winning football, which was, someone asked Pittman what the plan is. He said, that's it. Keep winning games. Sounds like a good plan to me.
I agree. Keep it simple, win games, nothing more than that. So that'll do it for this post-game edition right here of the Blue Horseshoe podcast. We will be back on Tuesday to lay out the playoff field. Let's go, baby. 6-5, winners of 3 in a row. 27-20 Colts over the Bucs right now. 7th and final playoff spot is theirs as we go into December. Let's go. Have a great victory Sunday. Have a great victory Monday. We'll talk to you Tuesday right here on the Blue Horseshoe Pod.